Right, let's get into some of the actual recent stuff. So if people don't know, at the moment, I don't have like a set vision of what we'll do with this show. We can do a bunch of things. It can be like a regular show of just what the news can be, the grist for the mill of what's going on. Or, like we said about the Zero topic, I thought the other angle would be, when a big topic like that happens, the other problem is you don't have like a platform to set these things up. So the idea would be we would just go and get like a guest who's relevant and we'll bring them on and we'll do the big things. So let's just talk a bit about some of the Cologne angles. So here's the thing. In general, when an event's happen, I like to just start with the winner and go backwards. So let's just start there. Right. On the G2 angle, Maniac, I'll ask you the obvious topic that surely is the other thing aside from the Zemu thing that everyone's been discussing for the last week. And it goes like this. How do you square the, square the circle, as it were, or resolve the equation of the HooXi factor? Because basically it's an obvious setup, isn't it? On the one hand, when you look at what G2 has done at the majors under him, it is nothing. Like, you can see why people like Casada are going crazy. At the same time, this is why I actually phrase it like it's not obvious. Like, it's not like there is an answer to this to me. At the same time, as I said on Twitter, and I don't take that back just because I don't like HooXi guys. Like, if you can win Cologne and Katowice in 1 year, well, spoiler, this is the third time ever it's been done. Like, that's really impressive. In a way, as a total accomplishment, I actually think that's better than a major because it's two massive tournaments and they're really hard and it does matter. So how does Maniac see this angle? How do you see specifically the HooXi angle? I mean, he has done something historic, even if he hasn't won the major. So how do you figure out? Like, does this mean he has to be good enough IGL for G2? Where do you place him in all this?
No, I think the first step is obviously acknowledging like what's happened this year, the whole Katowice and Cologne. Like, there's no way you can take that away from him. Like, that is an accomplishment for the roster, and that's ammunition for whoever's gunning for him or rather defending him. Now, my take on HooXi is the following: there are events where I have seen him be individually so bad that it becomes a liability, and it's not going to work at the top level. Period. Like, that's statement number one. There is a threshold under which you cannot fall, and if you do, it doesn't really matter if you have the best ideas in the universe. Counter-Strike at the high level, being as it is right now, is just not going to work. So there are some of these events, and they have happened, and when they do happen, that's it. That's a killer factor immediately for G2. Now, I will say, what he's done individually in Cologne was just good enough, individually, just good enough, to be able to be up to par, have a couple of trades here and there, be present in the server, not be like an easy picking on the CT side, not be like an easy target that people go against. He's done that. So that box checked for Cologne. I will also say that some of the calls he made in like key moments were actually both courageous and well thought out. Like, he's had moments where G2 was like 13-13, 14-14, and you got to call that B-rush, and you got to realize if you're an IGL, if you're in the semifinal and you call that B-rush round 29, and if you mess up, if you fuck up, that's on you. It's 100% on you. You called the wrong thing. So some of the calls that G2 made and some of the change of pace that they've made, I will attribute it to him. Although granted, I could be wrong. Could have been Niko, could have been Hunter, could have been JKS. For all I know, on the TeamSpeak say, listen, I think we should do this. We, as looking from the outside, we have to imagine that the leader actually has an actual say of whatever strategy is being used. So I think at key points, he had the right reads, and I think he got them out of some funky situations. These are the pluses. Now, on the minuses, or let's say the mitigating factors, when you have Hunter, Monacy, and Niko who are gunning at 1.2 or 1.3 ratings, yes, that does fucking help to win titles. It's part of the equation too. Like, do I believe HooXi is a good leader enough to win Cologne if Niko, Monacy, and Hunter are not playing like that? No, I don't think so. Because that's just how high the game is right now. That's how high level the game is. But I think with the pieces that he had in Cologne, he played individually to a decent level. He called well. He had key moments. Yeah, that was a great Cologne for him. Okay, the way I see it, there is not much difference between this HooXi winning Katowice Cologne in these two events isolated and the stretch that Carrigan had when he had this amazing few months where they won so much in 2022. That is the comparison. You can look at the numbers. They're very similar. The calling style, there's also a lot of similarities, and we know G2 and FaZe are sometimes mirroring how they play. I see a whole lot of similarities. So if you hate HooXi and you want him out, then just close your eyes and don't watch Cologne, because this was a good argument as to what he can do when his players are playing well and he's calling the right things.
Yeah, to me, this is actually one of those ones where, like, I've been describing it as, to me, he's the person where either I'm going to like use him as the exception that proves the rule, as you say in English, or maybe he's like the most extreme example of this. Because I have a general principle that goes like this. which is, since for IGL, we're always speculating to some degree, and even if you hear the calls, you don't even know what they always mean by it, and what they're like, how do they previously communicate? Do they have a shorthand for something? You'll never really know 100% what the IGL did. So since we're always speculating, a general rule I have goes like this: you can't be a bad in-game leader and win giant tournaments. I don't even think you can even do it and win one. I know there have been one-off like fluke wins in history, so I won't say it like totally, but as a general rule, like if you win a tournament, especially like a Cologne or a Katowice, like you notice Maniac, we might have a lot of shocks in the major because of the format, but like when someone like starlust does this Cologne run now, like there's a reason we give them all props. Like no one does go, who cares? Because you have to beat real teams to do it. Like generally the big Katowices and Colognes do have amazing teams making it deep down there. If you make top 4, you've done something big there. So I don't actually think you can do that and actually suck. Like if we picked out, I don't know who it would be, because to be fair, there's not a lot of in-game leaders people meme on, but if you pick out whoever people think the worst in-game leader is, I don't think they could even with this lineup. Even if you gave them Monacy and Niko and Jig, somehow basically essentially whatever they bring to the table would fuck it up. Like if the analogy was that the IGL in this case, because we're talking about an example of a team that is like a sort of a super team, it's all amazing ingredients, the analogy here would be that a bad in-game leader would be like a bad yeast that just fucks up the bread and makes it all really, and makes it less than the sum of its parts. So essentially, I don't think HooXi can actually be bad at his job. Like, if I look at it, my biggest problem, there's 2 main angles I have on this one, go like this. One, the problem is his job isn't the same set of expectations as Niko's job. And that's actually a narrative clash that we're having in this discussion, because I actually think the Kassad angle's not even something I need to take long to discuss. It's obvious. If I'm Kassad, I'm only looking at this from Niko's POV. And if it's Niko's POV, like, it's all well and good to win Cologne, but you're here to win the major. Like, people know that last major was about Ziwu or Niko better win this fucking major if they want to like end the game on like a high of Hadjou, and I was in there with it. So the real problem is, if you're HooXi, relative to who you have, you're doing a pretty good job. You've won 2 of the biggest events. Like, at the end of this year, there are going to be 3 big events, and you won 2 of them. You just didn't win the major. So if I'm HooXi, you're actually overperforming. You're doing a very good job. Like, obviously, by the way, winning events like that justifies staying on at the job and getting a few more months of it. That's all great. The problem is, that's not the stakes Niko's playing at. Niko's playing at the stakes of, like, it's sort of win the major or bust. I mean, the real hard part for Niko in his career, as much as I'm a critic of his, that I'll give him credit for, is a bit like Carrigan, they've always been on that hot seat, mate. The second they lost that Boston Major final, no joke, almost every day of their lives since has been like, you haven't won a major, you haven't won a major, you know what I mean? Like, it's just been that. So, like, the issue I think already that people haven't divided out is, I think it's totally justified if you look from the Niko perspective of like, but is HooXi actually good enough? Like, are they going to win a major? If you do that angle, I think it's fine. Like, I think it's a legitimate question. But like I say, I'll have to assume he's done something, because even if essentially he did nothing, this is a really counterintuitive point to a fan maybe, even if it seems like he did nothing, then that would suggest to me this is a rare team, and there are teams like this. Well, sometimes players don't need that much structure, or they don't want input. Like, a quick angle I'll bring up with you here, because it's something you can speculate from knowing the players, mate, is the Niko and Hunter angle. One, I just get the vibe at this point in his career, mate, because he himself is actually a very cerebral player, if people don't know. It's the reason why he never fucking mispositions ever, and he's just had such a long career of not having like really hard, like full-on IGLs. I get the vibe, it's not that Niko can't ever be like, can't have a leader, but I just get the vibe he gets to have his say and do what he wants anyway in all his teams, mate. So already I would assume Niko prefers a bit more of a hands-off approach. And then the other angle that no one ever brings up is the Hunter one, dude. If you ever watch, it looks like Hunter talks quite a lot in their team, mate. Like, I get the vibe personally, because if you remember, before HooXi, you might remember this story, they were talking about maybe Hunter became the IGL, I think, before Lexi B and after Nexa. That was even something they floated, I think. So I also wonder personally if part of the reason it works is like HooXi calls like a basic loose initial setup. Maybe he has like the basic beginning of the round, and then people like Hunter and Niko sort of get to do what they want to do, which I could see why that would play to what they might like. What do you think on all this?
I get what you mean, and I think there is truth to it. Whenever G2 is playing like a little bit slower play style, you know when they do exactly what you described, like map control a little bit, take some part of the map, but then see what the trades are happening, and then decisions are being made quite fast. Then in these moments, I'm fairly certain that a man like Niko comes in with a whole lot of talking, and Hunter as well, because they'll be in like opposite parts of the map sometimes. Like, they see, like, together they can piece out whatever the hell is happening. But what I will say, and it's referring to my first point as well, is that HooXi had a couple of like first, second call during Cologne that were great. And I'm talking about extremely fast paced, like decisions made towards the end of the game where, again, we're speculating. It could have been Niko, it could have been Hunter in the freeze time saying, listen, I think we should hit them with the B split immediately. But I will credit the IGL when you take such a risk to play so fast in a round. So some of these rounds, I'm not going to take anything away from HooXi, but I do agree with you that when you have players like Niko and Hunter, that kind of quality, the mid-rounding is much easier. Because not only do you have like good information, but you have probably good decision-making happening around you and you can just go with the flow. I just wanted to bounce back quickly on the Niko point and see what you think about it. Like, I also think that Niko in himself has played much better in these playoffs of Cologne that I had seen in the past. Like, I even made this tweet, and honestly, I just want to put a disclaimer out there. I am a huge fan of Niko as a player. Like, holy shit, as a rifle, like, greatest rifle we've had in the game, I don't need to be convinced. I am already convinced. But I have pointed out very clearly that there have been multiple finals where he individually had struggled. And it's just right there. It's no, again, we talk about objectivity, subjectivity. I can put the numbers out there. Some of these players where he struggled, and he talked about it on the desk when he came around, and he explained how he was working on trying to keep his nerves and his frustration under control and staying calm. That is also his part of the deal. Like, granted, he has exceptional quality, but we had seen in the past, and that with HooXi, that with Nexa, that with Alexibi, that with Kerrigan, he had moments where he was letting frustration get the best of him, and then he was becoming a free target because he was trying too much and he was putting himself out there in danger and he was dying. This was not the Niko that we saw in Cologne. It was much more measured, much more like refined and controlled, and knowing when to be goddamn aggressive make the difference. This was like a tweet, like a fine wine that aged so well that you just let it breathe for a few hours and then you just have the bouquet that's coming out. This was the Niko in Cologne. So I think when we're putting all on HooXi for losses or wins, in a way we're discrediting Niko for what he's done as well. Because if the baseline is Niko is so good he should win, then suddenly you're just putting a blanket on all of that he could have done better in the past. And that's a problem, because then you just assume that he was always 100% every single time he's played. And you're taking away from him the respect that he deserves for this Cologne, where he behaved like a true MVP. He was an MVP through and through, mostly in the playoffs. And that Niko right here could have maybe won more trophies with same leaders, with different leaders, because I give him the power of what he did as well. I'm not just saying, oh, well, unfortunately for you, Niko, you had the wrong IGL. You did your best. Good luck next time. No, I give him the credit for what he's done as well. And that, I think, is something that people, Kasad for that matter as well, can sometimes forget. Like, even if you are a fan of a player, I have no problem saying Sayu has to, could do, should do better. Because I also give him then the possibility to do better and to improve. If you just treat someone as a finished product, you rip them away from the possibility to be better. And I think that's detrimental.
Oh, I think also, I mean, obviously in part because of the aforementioned Boston Major, I think Niko also actually was in a similar position to what Zero is now, where the real problem goes like this. When you're as exceptionally and transcendently good as these players are, even though it's a totally unreasonable expectation, by the way, I'm not joking, we expect you to perform every time. Every time, especially, by the way, if it's a big stage. If you're on like a massive stage against other players, like, I mean, I even say it like this, and I want this pressure to be on people's shoulders. I actually hate it, by the way, when like, I mean, the example here would be like what Sun Pius did. I hate it when some rookie walks in. To me, still a rookie, essentially. Like, I use it in the colloquial sense, not the literal sense. To me, essentially, like, if you're someone like a Simple or something, Sun Pius is supposed to be the little rookie that, like, the joke is in the big stage match, I want you to play me then, mate. That's when I've got all my experience. I hate the idea that person walks in and shows you up and they're slapping you around and you look silly. Like, it's supposed to be the other way around in the way the competition works. So, on the Niko angle, I actually think, by the way, it was also quite fair when people criticised Niko like that over the years. I do think there's times where he didn't perform. Like, the joke is, this is why I think this one especially deserves so much praise, because when he won Katowice, I even had a hot take on one of my shows, which was like, I said, oh no, it was a Snake and Banter, you know, where we do the good, the bad and the ugly. I picked it as ugly, Niko winning, because the reason I said it was ugly is because we're all going to do the Dupree, where they go, well done, Niko. You've won Katowice finally. And it's like, bro, that was one of his worst finals in ages. Like, he was pedestrian in that final. It was the others. It was people like Hunter and JKS. They were the ones popping off in that tournament. So, yeah, he won it. But, like, the joke is when we criticised him for not winning, that was when he would have been, like, the absolute MVP and best player. So, the cool thing about him winning Cologne is he checked all the boxes. Like, this is the one where it's actually why, as an aside, because it's one thing I told you I actually like about the idea of us doing the shows, we can get a bit more philosophical. As an aside, the other cool thing I think about the way that Niko has especially won this Cologne is it actually does remind me of how Carrigan had all the success last year. It's like you did actually, like a movie, like sort of absorb all the lessons of your career and all the times you did fail and all the times you did fuck up. And like you say, it's not like actually it wounds you to become worse. This was the masterpiece right here. In the same way as we've all seen those games last year where Carrigan would do like the most insane 30th round call that like anyone in the server can see. Like, that has to be him. If you watch this final that they just played right now, Ents against G2, first of all, spoiler, I thought Ents was sort of a sleeper favourite for that final, mate. I know now everyone's going to go, yeah, but the experience... No one knew how G2 would play. They're such a hit and miss team. I personally thought Ents was going to win that final. And then secondly, the main reason they didn't is Niko. There's other factors as well. Monacy played great and all like that. No, mate, to me, when I watched that game, I told people before, this is the series afterwards. You go and get those POVs that people put on YouTube and you watch all the Niko T-sides. Because some of the stuff he was doing was unbelievable, mate. It's like it was the highest level of rifling I think I've ever seen. It was, and he did it on all 4 maps in a row. It was unbelievable. So like the joke is, this is why you have to sort of hold these players to a higher standard. Because if we did that, like if we acted like that's what he did at the Katowice one, like, oh look, you just won the tournament, so you're the best ever. Like, no, these players can do more. So I thought there's 2 angles here. One, there's sort of like I say, to me, I think it's interesting, like philosophically, like if anything, it's actually leveled Niko up all the failures and hardships he's gone through all the years. Like that's why at the end of the game, think how cool this is. At the end of CSGO, he's at his best ever with the rifle. It's probably the best level of rifle we've ever seen. To see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content, well, subscribe to this channel then, or be a pleb and don't.